And joining me now is Rutger Hofste from the World Resources Institute. Hello, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Could you start off by talking us through what you mean by water stress? I mean, could you give us an idea of how long the 17 countries worst affected have before demand outstrips supply?
Yeah, thank you for having me, and happy to explain water stress a little bit better. Water stress is a ratio of water demand divided by total water supply. And literature shows that if this ratio exceeds 40 or 80%, there is a risk of running into conflict or a dire situation in times of drought.
And how did we find ourselves in this situation with, in your report that you helped to author, 61 countries ranked as having extremely high or high water stress?
Yeah, so we looked at the world and the historical data, and we found that demand is the main driver of the global water stress. In fact, humankind is 250%, so 2.5 more, thirstier than it was in the 1960s. And we looked at different sectors for water withdrawal, water demand, and that includes irrigated agriculture. That's the biggest one at approximately 70%, but also industry and domestic water withdrawals are up.
And your report, does it have any recommendations for governments? I mean, what would you say is its main message to governments worldwide?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. We looked at baseline water stress, and it's the most used proxy for water-related stress situations. However, it's not your destiny, we call it. So there are a lot of examples of hope. The outlook of water stress really depends on the management. And even countries with relatively high water stress have effectively secured their water supplies through proper management. And we have 3 examples, but there are more than 3 examples. One is Saudi Arabia. It's ranked number 8 in terms of water stress in our rankings, but they price water to incentivize conservation. And this new Qatra, it means droplet in Arabic, program sets water conservation targets and aims to reduce water usage by 43% within the next decade. And then Namibia is the second example. It's one of the most arid countries in the world, but yet it has turned sewage water into drinking water, and it has done so for the last 50 years. And then the third example is Australia, where nearly half the domestic water use during the millennium drought. And they're using a water trading scheme. It's in fact the largest in the world, and it allows for smart allocation of water among users in the face of variable supplies.
So you mentioned there what you could call some good students, but overall, would you say that countries worldwide are taking this issue seriously enough?
Unfortunately not. I think our relationship with water worldwide needs a rethinking. That is a topic for another time. Like we now investigated how big the problem is. We investigate a few trends and a few pockets of hope. In terms of solutions, we can think of multiple ways to address the issue. As mentioned before, approximately 70% of the withdrawal worldwide is for irrigated agriculture. So there's a lot to gain there. So increasing agricultural efficiency would be the number 1 option on the solution shortlist. And then second, when demand increases, whereas supply stays constant or even the variability increases due to climate change, we need to use all the tools in our toolbox to save water when there is a surplus, when there's a flood, and we need to get water from reservoirs or wetlands when there is a drought. So really, we call it green and gray infrastructure, where you really take both solutions when it comes to building reservoirs, but also forests and replenishing groundwater. And then the last item on the menu of solutions is to really think of wastewater as used water that can be a source to use again. So treat it, reuse it, and recycle wastewater.
Now, if I understand correctly, individual consumption isn't a massive issue, but if you could give us some quick tips on what we can do as individuals.
Oh, yeah. So that's a good question. However, this research is not about individual consumption and recommendations for that. This is more about the global trends and what we're seeing at a global scale. Like the agricultural efficiency, the green-gray infrastructure, and treating, reusing, and recycling wastewater. Those are at a global level their main recommendations. At a like what you can do as an individual, that is another research.
All right, well, at least we've raised awareness. Thank you very much indeed, Rutger Hofste, for joining us there from the World Resources Institute.